an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Killing Eve, Season 2, Episode 3, The Hungry Caterpillar. In this episode, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Eve's husband, but I feel like the damage is done whether he decides to cheat on her or not. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Melanie for commissioning this episode. It was so weird. I saw Melanie's name on the schedule and I was like, oh, okay. So there's another, I thought there was a little bit of a wait before next Gravity Falls. And then I checked and I was like, oh, it was a bit of a surprise. Y'all, this episode is really not what I expected. And even if you ask me what I expected, I'm not even sure I have a good answer for you on that. It's just that I keep thinking, you know what it is? I expect Eve to be on the road all the time. I don't think that I really thought the show was going to be like set in London. And I say that with quotes around it because I'm not sure still that it's set in London. We're only partway through the second season. Most of it has been in other countries, like, you know, the first season has. I don't know if we are going to remain in London at this point based on the fact that she being Villanelle, takes off with Constantine, and I imagine that they are not going to stay in the country. But I, for some reason, had it in my head that this episode we would see, again, travel somewhere else. And I think that I want that when I really face up to where that's coming from, because I don't want to deal with Nico anymore. And I feel kind of bad about that because Nico isn't a bad dude and it's not like he's an unreasonable guy. He's just a very ordinary person in a show full of extraordinary people. So it's easy to get frustrated with him and even a little bored by him because you are just like watching people with skills and talents and personalities that are so above and beyond that it's delightful. Even people like Kenny, who are fairly sedate in their personality and their looks, are in their way really extraordinary. Like Kenny is just able to get access to information that he shouldn't be able to because he is so skilled. And he stands up to Eve in a way that I say stands up. He gives her what she wants. So I guess that's not really standing up to her, but he calls her out. And kind of has more self-respect than Nico seems to have at times, you know? And I think that another reason why I'm kind of over Nico at this point is because I honestly feel Nico could do better than Eve. I feel that Nico should probably divorce Eve. And I hate that because I really like that is not a statement of like Eve sucks and I want him to, you know, break her heart, or that Eve deserves it, although she kind of does. He is clearly not a priority for her. And I feel like you can't have a relationship that chugs along like this forever. She doesn't really respect him, and it really comes across that she doesn't really respect him or what he does, and she doesn't prioritize the things that are important to him. Whether you love someone or not, I feel the older I grow and the more I see of relationships and the common themes of frustrations that people go through in their relationships, there is this sort of attitude that love is like the main factor. And the thing that people seem to do is isolate the concept of love as like just an emotion that can exist in a vacuum. And if you love someone, anything is possible. But the more I see, the more I begin to think that love is actually a result of a combination of other emotions. Love does not exist on its own. It is created by a combination of affection and attraction and respect and pride and all of these other things. So when you say you love someone, but you don't really seem to respect them, I question whether you actually love them. Because if you don't respect them, there's not a good foundation there. If you love someone without respect, that feels like pity. I don't want that. That's not something I'm interested in. I don't think Nico wants that. And that's low-key what it feels like he's getting a lot of the time. So what I'm saying is, Nico wants a normal life. Nico wants a normal wife. He wants somebody who will have a 9-to-5 job, who will support him with his work, who will be there for him, emotionally available, mentally present. He wants something that I wonder so much about who Eve used to be before all of this happened, because we start the show with there already feeling like there's a little bit of distance between them. There's a, couple fights that they have at one point when she says, I know you love me. Sometimes I feel like that's all you have. There's a feeling there of her having bottled up this like opinion of him over the course of several years. And I feel that this like case is simply breaking through a crack, like forcing it open that was already there. It's a symptom of a problem that, the problem existed between the two of them long before Villanelle ever came into the picture. So the fact that Villanelle messes with Eve's marriage this episode, and that is a major focal point. And I'll be talking about like everything in order, but I'm going to talk about the major themes here. Villanelle approaches this woman whose name I'm forgetting, who has clearly been flirting with Nico, and it is just so over the top. And by over the top, I don't mean in terms of the acting or the writing, like them being like too extreme. I mean that the girl doing the flirting in her character is somebody who does not have any sense of, I almost want to say pride or shame. She is so obvious with her interest in him. And he protests when Eve says to him very accurately, oh my gosh, she clearly wants a piece of you. I can't think that Nico doesn't, he can't fail to notice her interest. It's a question for me, because I have had dudes genuinely not realize that they have just been hit on really hard. And it's sort of a weird thing with a lot of guys. It'll go either one way or the other. There are dudes who you can just be civil to, and they will swear that you want their dick so bad. And it's like, I asked you if you would please hand me a napkin. What are you kidding me? And there are so many guys like that. And then there are guys like this who you're like, do you want me to just strip naked and climb on top of you? What do I have to do to get you to see? And I don't know which one Nico, I don't know if he's that, is he just being modest? Is he just like maybe he's trying to claim that he doesn't realize so that he can continue to be around her without it seeming like he's cultivating this relationship on purpose? That might be it. Because if you admit that somebody's into you and you hang out with them one-on-one after that, that is you tacitly encouraging them and letting the people in your life know that you are okay with this and are fine with it continuing. So I don't know. Maybe he knows and he's just lying so that he can keep seeing her, or maybe he doesn't and he just doesn't think of her that way. Nico strikes me as the kind of guy who really would never cheat on Eve. And even when he goes and calls to this girl and asks her to wait up and tells Eve to go home, that just feels like a real petty swipe, but it doesn't feel like a threat to me. I feel like depending on the character, if you had them do that, you could see that as them being like, oh, I'm about to go fuck somebody, or I want you to think I'm about to go fuck somebody. But with him, it feels a lot more just like, I know this is going to annoy you and I don't intend anything by it, but you know what? You deserve to be annoyed right now. So fuck you. And I'm going to do this just to irritate you. And I'm very interested to see if I'm right about that at all. I cannot decide who he is. There's things I've seen, but then there's things that can push a person too far. And he is going through it right now. What him and Eve have been experiencing in their relationship is very extreme. And who he might be as a person normally might be put to the test, and he might turn out to not quite be that person anymore on the other side of all this. And all of that to say, Villanelle, I said something about Villanelle, what's the word I used? Meddling? I don't think that's the word I originally used, but that's pretty much it. Villanelle is meddling by going to the girl that Nico has been hit on by several times and sort of instilling the fear of dying alone into this girl's heart. And the girl complains about how, and she kind of says it to Eve's face, which is one of those amazing moments of, you could be saying this as a real joke, or you could be insinuating something. And we know she's insinuating something because we know what she thinks. And I think Eve knows too. But when she meets Eve, she says something about how we were all beginning to think that Nico had an imaginary wife because we never see you. Is the next line there that remains unsaid. So she's talking about this with Villanelle, of course, completely unaware who Villanelle is. And I do want to talk about Villanelle's costume once we get there. And Villanelle basically, because she says, his wife doesn't even notice him and he's just such a great guy and he's married, unfortunately. And Villanelle says something about how, you've got to put yourself on his mind. And she says something about spray your perfume in his classroom so that it smells like you. And she suggests a couple other things. And the woman says, that feels a little manipulative. And Villanelle just says, it is. That's why it works. And I really liked that. She doesn't try to be like, oh, no, manipulative. No, I would never. She's like, yeah, it is. And sometimes that's the fuck what you got to do. So this girl is being sort of propelled toward Nico, but I'm not gonna blame Villanelle for this. Villanelle obviously sort of influenced somebody that I feel, if given enough time, they would have gone down this road eventually anyway. And I say this road because I assume this girl is going to take Villanelle's advice. I might be wrong about that. She might decide that maybe I should go after somebody single instead, But I think that this girl has been overt enough so far that taking it to the next level is not out of the question for her. So one could say that Villanelle is meddling, and of course she is. This is a purposeful plan that she's carrying out here. But she's not forcing anyone to do anything yet. It might come to that eventually. But as of right now, she is simply putting ideas in people's heads and doing that thing that we often are looking for when we talk to friends about stuff. we want them to tell us to do the thing that we want to do already in our heart. And Villanelle shows up and tells this woman basically, try and steal the guy you're in love with away from his wife. And she wants to do that. And she's kind of already started doing that. So she is willing, I think, to hear Villanelle when, you know, maybe a few months ago, she wouldn't have been as receptive to this. But it's clear she's heading down that road to me. So really, as much as Villanelle is meddling, I'm not going to lay responsibility for anything that happens between Nico and this woman at her feet at all. That woman is a grown woman and Nico is a grown man, and they both know what's right and wrong and what's cool and what's not cool. And if they decide to do some shit, Villanelle never drugged and forced them to do anything. Villanelle never lied and created scenarios that made them each think that the other was like, you know, interested. She never did anything more than nudge them a tiny, tiny bit. Now she may change. That may change. She may do some more drastic shit later, but as of right now. And now I really do need to back up. All right, let's back up. Let's start off with the conversation between Constantine and Eve. And she is talking to him because obviously he got revealed as being, you know, in the room and talking to Carolyn at the end of last episode. And Eve is asking him what the deal is with him being here, what Carolyn offered him. And he tells her that his family is being protected by MI6 and that his daughter thinks that he is dead. And Eve asks him, are you okay with that, with never seeing your family again? And he gives her this look that's sort of like inscrutable and then just says, change the subject. Can I tell you guys, and I've talked before about my father being like having a history of violence. I will put it that way. And me asking some things about his past and how he would close up in a way that when you think about somebody getting an aura to them that feels threatening, when you imagine somebody who has a lot of charisma suddenly becoming icy, you imagine that as being shown and displayed on the face as anger. But those of you who have met somebody like that and seen this sort of thing happen know that's not necessarily how it looks. And for my father, when he would get really rattled is not even quite the word I want, but when you could see he was a little bit emotionally like unprepared for whatever had just happened, he would get this blank sort of expression that was impossible to read. And only if you knew him really well did you begin to recognize that blank expression as a danger signal. If you didn't know him, it would look almost like he had missed whatever was happening. There would almost be like you'd want to repeat yourself. Like, did you hear me? And, you know, that's a mistake. And Constantine in this moment got such a familiar expression when she asks, are you okay with never seeing your daughter again? Before he says, change the subject. And it reminded me so much of me asking my father once if he had ever killed anybody. And he just looked at me for a second and then said, you ask too many questions. And I remember just being like, oh, and you know, like that's an answer. Yes, it is an answer. But it was one of those like kind of, okay, I'm going to change the subject. I'm not going to push, even though you imagine that if you were in that position and somebody answered that way, you would want to push. The opposite is true. You immediately are like, okay. And that's the way Eve reacts when he says, change the subject. She immediately does. Like she can sense that in that way lies nothing good, and I am just going to drop it. So then she says, where is Villanelle? And he tells her, you don't want to know. And she says, yes, I do. And he says that she is like a parasite. She eats your life up until there is only to make room for herself. Like that book with the hungry worm and all the food, pickles, tomatoes, the hungry caterpillar. I love this so much. That's her burrowing in and creeping around. And Eve says something about, like, she tries to sort of accuse him of saying all of this to her as a means of sheltering Villanelle. But he says, I don't have a reason to lie about this. You have something worth having. Don't let her take it. And I know you think she loves you. You need to make her hate you. Hate is something she understands. It's manageable. Look at what happens to the people she loves. And I love that he basically is saying she fucks up the lives of the people that she loves because she does not know how to handle an emotion like that. Hate is a very simple thing, and she gets it. But love is something that she does not fucking understand. And so has no frame of reference, has no, what's the word I want? Restraint. No sense of boundaries. No real basis for it. And so it's really destructive when she's experiencing it. And that is interesting. I never really thought of it like that, because Villanelle has been somebody that I have frequently said she can act so well when she wants someone to believe that she cares about something, that she's regretful, that she's getting emotional. She is flawless as an actress. So it makes it unclear to me when she is actually experiencing it and when she's just using it as manipulation. I have seen a few times that I thought it was real and then second guessed myself. Most of the times that I realized that it was not real, it was confirmed a few seconds later by some act of hers that it wasn't. And then there's times like when she's talking to Constantine at his house and he's telling her how much he loves her, and she begins to get really teary-eyed. And I was like immediately feeling this is real. And then I was like, is it though? I don't know. And once we see their reunion this episode, I think it was. So that's interesting because I was like not convinced that Villanelle could even experience love. I didn't know if she had it in her to grow attached to people, to be capable of that sort of emotion. And what he is saying is essentially she can experience it, but she does not have the capacity to healthily express it to a person. She isn't able to use something like love towards a partnership in a relationship. She just knows how to, that sort of emotion sort of fuels her to become a steamroller that crushes everything else in your life until she is all that there is. That's pretty... I like this. I like this as a frame of reference that, I can say now that I think Villanelle does really care about certain people. But that does not translate to them being protected or better off, or that's not, she doesn't work that way. When she loves somebody, it can be a very different, that doesn't mean for her the same thing that it means for other people. So I appreciated this insight, and I think he is right about it. It's easy to watch him say this and be like, is he serious or is he just trying to put Eve off? And I think it's a combination. I think he is trying to put Eve off, but because he has just had to put his family into witness protection and pretend to be dead in order to save them. He is realizing that Eve could very quickly fall into the same trap as he has, and he is trying to keep her from being in this position. At the same time, he winds up like teaming up with Villanelle again at the end of the episode, but I don't believe that he was going to do that unless he had gotten the information about where his family is. So, it's an interesting question, but I am thinking he is sincere in his speech here to her. And yeah, when he says, like, look at Anna, Nadia, and look at me. And Eve, that seems to sink in for her a little bit. And she doesn't, like, acknowledge it, and we cut away. There's no reply from her. But there's a real sense in that moment that sort of description of her attitude rang true for her in her gut. And I really like to see this sort of thing too, because Eve has been, up until now, the only person who has seemed to really understand Villanelle that well. Carolyn has to a point, but Eve has been the one that's really like devoted so much time to figuring out this assassin. And Carolyn is working off of the same evidence as Eve and interpreting it usually according to the same like standards as Eve. So she's naturally going to come to a similar conclusion. But I really like seeing a conversation between two people who have gotten to know Villanelle really well, or at least somewhat well, comparing notes like this, like having Constantine talk about Villanelle to Eve with this kind of frankness and sincerity is just kind of a treat. It's really fun to watch Eve's response to someone, for a change, knowing Villanelle a little better than her. She doesn't give most people's opinion of Villanelle much weight. And Constantine's assessment here, it's a combination of him having known Villanelle for such a long time and her knowing that, and also seeing the evidence with her own eyes of what Constantine has gone through. So there's just so much. I loved this scene. I wish there was more of the two of them together, because they have really crackling chemistry, but it's also very odd chemistry because they're sort of at odds with each other a lot of the time, even though they do want the same thing. They don't. It's so strange. Anyway, so we cut to Villanelle apparently as like a doorman. I'm not even sure. She's in a uniform working in this huge building. And she goes up to this guy and asks if he is Greg Richardson. I read about you in an article in The Economist. I've always wanted to work here. And he says, congratulations, enjoy the job, thinking that she means, And he keeps on putting her off, and she continues being this like overly eager, bright, bubbly sort of ingenue type. And I live for when she plays these roles, because she is just so convincing. Like, it is wonderful to see this actress get to really flex and spread out her wings, so to speak, and play these different people. It's wonderful. So she goes up to this guy and she says, this tie is perfect. Where is it from? And he says, Hermes. And she looks at it and says, no, it's not. It's fake. And she says that in her regular Russian accent. And he gets an expression on his face as he seems to realize a little too late who he is dealing with. And she grabs the necktie and holds it as the elevator doors close. And you hear the like machinery inside the elevator whirring as she holds him there, and then the crack of his neck breaking. And she tries to tell her handler, Ray? I feel like his name is Ray. They talk about him later. She tries to tell him that she made it look like an accident. And it was such a wonderful moment because Owen was in the room when I was watching this scene. And he saw this dude, the way he died, and like sort of turned to me, and I was like, he said, why would you do it that way? And I was like, I think she's trying to make it look like an accident. And he's like, an accident? That doesn't look like an accident. Who does that happen to? And I was like, that's a good question. And sure enough, that winds up being sort of the bone of contention later. Is like, people are trying to say that it's an accident. She's trying to claim she made it look like an accident. And it really doesn't. Like, it's far enough off from her regular MO to be maybe not her, but it's not so far off as to be something the ghost would ever do. So it's sort of just adding a little bit of confusion, but it is certainly not staying low profile the way she has been instructed to do. So, all right, I'm trying to find a next spot. We have this scene where Eve has made an omelet for Nico. It is terrifying looking. I really, guys, just don't. If I totally get the impulse to want to cook for somebody who tends to cook for you all the time. But honestly, unless you're just going to make something like out of a box that you can handle, just don't do it. Like when Owen cooks for me, all I ask is that he makes macaroni and cheese. That's all I really like. He can handle that. And I love macaroni and cheese. But I'm not going to ask Owen to make me real food because nobody's going to enjoy that. He's going to hate doing it. I'm going to hate eating it. And Eve is trying to be nice here, but it's one of those moments of me just being like, oh, Eve, honey, no. So we have this whole thing of like him trying to flirt with her and her running out because she has to go to work and him being left there. And this is part of what sort of feeds into the vibe between them later when she comes to the party and sees him talking to this young bubbly girl who's clearly very into him. Eve knows that she has been neglecting him sexually. And this is the thing. Just saying that you can't have sex right now because you have to go to work is not the same as neglecting sexually. But the show needs to use a shorthand to indicate that this is something that, Nico has been feeling. And we have seen enough of how things have been between the two of them recently to accept that likely this has been happening a few times. So Eve then decides that she's going to try and come on to him in his classroom as a means of making up for the time that she missed this morning and hopefully to distract her husband from this young piece of tail that's working with him now. It doesn't work out, but this is the beginnings of that. We have an interesting thing here when Villanelle goes to check into this bizarre hotel, into room 207, one of your company's usual suites. I love this so much, guys, because this feels like a really low rent John Wick situation. This dude knows what the fuck is up. And he doesn't really, I don't think, but it's clear he works with the shady people enough that he's aware and knows to keep his mouth shut, keep himself to himself. I love her looking over at the fact that he's drinking some vodka in his tea, and she tries to give him a look and shame him. Raymond. Yes, it is Raymond. Thank goodness. And he left a note for her that just says, stay in your room. So what she does a ton of ordering of clothing online and puts it on the account, that is paying the credit card account that is paying for her room. And the hotel itself is really, really shabby. She is not impressed. I mean, we know Villanelle. She loves luxury, man. She loves it. It's so fun honestly. I really enjoy seeing a character who indulges in this way, but doesn't have an extremely like flamboyant sort of personality, because I feel like those two things go together a lot with like, with just in media and movies and TV. If somebody tends to love luxury, they also tend to be somebody who's like, darling, you know, it's often played as like either they are very flamboyant, but they're super fun and effusive and whatever, or they are wasteful and vain. And she is the kind of person that you wouldn't necessarily know if you ran into her on the street, that there's no, you know, stereotype that's happening with her to say that she's like loves to spend, has a fucking refrigerator literally full of champagne, which is so hilarious. So I just like how understated she can be until she decides to put on like a pink tulle dress and go and see her shrink, you know. It's just fun, and I think it's a nice nod to how many facets a person's personality can have. I am just so into luxury, guys, and it's like a tragedy being born poor. And I'm able to afford a lot more luxury at this point in my life than I ever have. And believe you me, I am enjoying every goddamn second of it so much. But I really like, there are times where I feel like money is wasted on certain people who don't seem to enjoy it or like indulge enough. And it's delightful to watch Villanelle use that money in what I consider a proper way. So she is talking to Ray, and he has just got this incredibly threatening vibe, guys. I love the casting here, and I think I said this before, but man, Ray is so much more frightening because he looks so ordinary. You know what I mean? Like, there is something about him that's a very like banality of evil. And I 100% buy his threatening act, despite the fact that he's just wearing a pair of Dockers and like a zippered jacket. There's nothing about him. He doesn't have an impressive physique. He doesn't have a particularly memorable face. You wouldn't remember him very well, you know? But there is something about him that's frightening, really, truly. And I am fascinated by him, especially because I've never seen this actor before. And I feel like he could be used pretty well. I want to say he could actually play a pretty decent Binder in the Dresden Files, but that's a whole other thing. So he says something to her about, now that you're sloppy seconds, it's only a matter of time. Oh, you didn't know? There's a new girl in town. Uh-oh. And Villanelle tries to say that she doesn't care, that I'm glad you hired somebody else so she can take up the slack and do the easy stuff. And he's like, oh, no. She doesn't work for us. We're going to try and hire her because we are very impressed. But right now, MI6 is ahead of us and might get there first. And this is when she really pays attention and is like, they're looking for her. And he's like, oh yeah, Eve Pilastri, I think your friend. She's looking for her specifically. Just doesn't seem to have a lot of time to think about you anymore. And I, on the one hand, hate this guy. And on the one hand, have to applaud him because he knows exactly what the fuck. And I don't think I knew that the organization Villanelle works for was aware of her obsession with Eve. Now, hear me out, because I know that all of the things that we've been seeing her do, they should know, and this should not come as a particular surprise to me, but there are times where putting the pieces of that sort of thing together take longer than you would expect them to. And it seems like Constantine was really the only one to fully understand or get the whole story on what had been happening in that department. And he's gone now. Of course, there's also like official records from MI6 that they might have access to. I don't know who is involved with them. But I found it really interesting that the organization is now beginning to manipulate Villanelle based on how she feels about Eve. And I wouldn't be surprised if in future they begin to really use that against Villanelle in some way. Like, saying they might hold Eve hostage feels a little too strong and too literal, but I feel like that could potentially be a thing where they like are nudging her into action in order to keep Eve safe somehow. And I don't know. This is just a little bit of a turn for me that I didn't see coming. And I love when she says, Eve will know that was me. And he says, will she? It seems like she's really not thinking about you at all. And the overacting in the moment when he like says this to her and stares her down is really so insulting, condescending, patronizing. It is a thing of beauty to watch this man really go to town manipulating her. And she knows he's doing it, man. That's the part that's so annoying. There's nothing worse than knowing that you're being manipulated and also knowing that shit is working like a fucking charm. You feel like such a fucking dope. But like, there are just some things that for us, we can't help. We are going to have a reaction. We are going to feel the need to do something in one direction or another. And the smugness of him when he sees that every shot he just took landed and she is fucking gonna do the thing. And when he closes the door on her, she is staring at him, his retreating form, with this like expression on her face. Like she would love to rip his throat out with her teeth. And this leads to her making some very foolish choices a little bit later. So, and one of them he actually completely sees coming and makes it a point to kind of, what's the word I want? Just kind of poke at her a little bit. So yeah, this is when she begins to call up, first she calls up the school that Nico works at. And we find out a little bit later that this is something that has gotten like around that this is going on. But according to the people, like the one woman that we speak to who's really into Nico, so she's probably not super reliable, nobody is really buying it, that these complaints are real. But yeah, this is what she says. She just says, I need to make another complaint about one of your teachers. And she's doing this in like this really childlike voice. And it's sort of like when she says, I need to make another complaint, I found that interesting because it was like, this is something she's apparently been doing. And this is just the latest installment. And we don't get to see what the complaints are. I was assuming that she was going to say something about sexual harassment. And the thing is, like, we know whatever she's saying Nico didn't do, but also the accusation being tossed aside as, oh, nobody believes these crazy accusations anyway by this other girl. If that is what it is, that makes me very twitchy. You know, I want us to believe people when they say they've been assaulted or harassed. And so to see people just be like, oh, Nico's a good guy, we know he'd never, immediately my hackles raise. And I'm like, you don't know anything. Shut up. But we do know. So we cut to to Eve and her new team, including Kenny, discussing this latest murder with the tie caught in the elevator, and whether or not this was done by the ghost, whether or not this was done by Villanelle. And Eve seems to sense that it was likely Villanelle, but also says it doesn't seem like her style. So I like that. I really like that Eve is willing to put all of her thoughts out there and be like, this seems like this, but also that doesn't match with this. She's not somebody who comes in with like a theory and then won't look at the evidence. In order to uphold that theory, she is somebody who has her theory and then will recognize and address when evidence doesn't seem to match that. I don't know. I wasn't sure because of the way that Villanelle changed her MO, whether or not she was right. Eve will know it was me. Like, I wondered, will she? As soon as Raymond says that, I'm like, ooh. But it feels that yes. And later on we get like this amazing scene in the hotel. So, all right, let's jump ahead a little bit here. Let's go to, I pretty much talked about Nico and Eve at the party. I really loved how he asked Eve to wear something slutty. And she says it's going to be so slutty, just you wait. I just really love that interaction between the two of them. And then she shows up in, I think, the blue dress that we saw her purchase last episode, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the same one. And yeah, she does. She looks amazing. And the woman that he was just talking to does that thing that you do when you feel weird around someone. And maybe I say that you do because I do this, and so I assume everyone does, but that may not be true. I lead with compliments when I don't know somebody well, when I'm just meeting them, and I don't mean that I lead with compliments in that I invent things to say because I can't think of anything to say. I mean the compliments I give. I never fake that, ever. Like, I just won't say anything about a thing if I don't, but I find that compliments sort of warm people and ease them, and they can be an in for like a safe topic of conversation. I love your dress. Where did you get it? Oh, really? I've never been there. Or, oh my God, I go there all the time. Did you see it such and such? They have such. And then you can have a little 15-minute icebreaker conversation about whatever you complimented them on that isn't loaded with fucking, political minefields, religious, like, it's safe. And so this woman initially, I was like, okay, I see what you're doing. But then she goes on, and I was like, yeah, you feel really guilty, and you're trying to be cool, and you're kind of trying to make yourself, like, slap yourself is the vibe I got. Like, this woman keeps on being like, you are beautiful, your hair, that dress, wow, such a babe. And she says this, like, the way that you say when you are trying to tell yourself, what am I doing? 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 Like, there's a real sense to her of being like, wow, I really thought I was up against some peevish old woman is probably like what she was hoping to imagine. And then instead this like goddess walks in, and she's like, oh God, I am not up against who I thought, and I do not have the upper hand like I kind of thought I did. And she even like goes forward to like hug Eve. And I kind of loved the look that Nico gives her when she pulls away, like he's interested in this display. Yeah, this is, I really like the acting of everybody in this scene. It is appropriately awkward without feeling too put on. It's clear what the fuck is going on. but not to a point where you feel like it would make like the entire office gossip or be embarrassed. So yeah, this is just really well done. But I talked about this pretty much already, so I'm not going to get back into this because I only have 10 minutes left. Him and Eve are hanging around in his classroom. She's trying to come on him, and then she spots an apple sitting on his desk. And she completely freaks out. I thought for a second that there was a bite out of it. But no, it was just an apple. And she looks at it, and you see Nico get this expression on his face and say, "Is everything okay?" With this, like, look in his eye of, like, really? He wants to ask her, because that's the right thing to do. And he's going to ask her. But you can see he is tired and he is pissed. And sure enough, she doesn't even like stop to talk to him. She just goes out into the hallway and pulls the fire alarm. And then goes outside waiting to see if Villanelle comes out. And what kills me here is that I don't know what Eve thought was going to happen. Did she think Villanelle was going to care about a fire alarm and run outside with everybody? There's nobody like going from room to room ensuring that the building has been properly evacuated. Is there? Like, even if there were, Villanelle will hide and she'll go out a different exit. Like, any number of ways of handling this other than she just shows herself. I don't know. Maybe Eve thought she wanted to show herself and so would take this opportunity for her dramatic moment. But overall, the whole thing is, in my opinion, it's like a just really frustrating scene. And as she is sitting there, looking for Villanelle and realizing maybe she was mistaken, Nico is like, "Dude, I can't believe that I finally got you to come to one of these. And you made it about you again. How do you keep doing this?" And he says, "You know what? You clearly don't want to be here. And actually, I just want you here." And he then says, "Hey, Gemma, hold on." And she says, "Come on, Nico, really?" And sure enough, he goes. And she just stands there, not sure what to fucking do. Meanwhile, Villanelle sneaks up behind her and drops a lipstick into her bag. Later on, she uses this lipstick and finds an X-Acto knife blade embedded in the lipstick, and it cuts her lip. Guys, you get given something to put around your mouth by a fucking assassin. Are you going to do that? Like, it took me... I wanted her to have all of her clothing checked and that perfume sample checked and everything that she got put in her luggage before she tried anything on, because God knows. And this is just something that turned up in her purse that she immediately starts to put on. Like, girl, what are you doing? And the look on Villanelle's face when she drops it into her bag, I think Villanelle realizes that Eve saw the apple and took the action she did because of it. So this is Villanelle getting a bit of reassurance that Eve is indeed still thinking about her. And so she looks elated. Then we get this scene between Villanelle and Constantine. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here because Eve goes to Kenny and demands the information on where Constantine's family is. And Kenny is just like, "I do not want to do this. This is like, you know, I don't feel that we should hand over this information." And she says they'll still be safe. I just need some leverage. And he says no, flat out. And she says, "You realize we have a small window. She might be gone already. We are not losing her this time. You are going to get this information. You work for me." And later on, he says something to her about how he thought she was different, but she isn't. And I really liked this development because Kenny is sort of a side character, but he is crucially important. And having him on her side has been what has gotten Eve to where she has gotten. And if she doesn't maintain a decent relationship with him, she's going to be all on her own. And I think she kind of is by the end of this episode. I wonder if she can repair this. I don't know. But it's a really awful scene to watch her just like dress him down and make it clear that he is just like not really a person to her. And the way he says, okay, thanks, as he walks away is cutting. So she goes and talks to Constantine and trades the information on where his family is for the information on where Villanelle is. And Villanelle, for her part, when she comes back and sees him because he has gone to her room, she runs at him, and she has a knife out, by the way, because she doesn't know who she's going to be facing. And she is so happy to see him. It was a really unexpected, sweet moment. I thought she might still stab him in the back. I'll be honest. She does not do that. Later on, she tries to claim that she didn't even aim for his heart when she tried to shoot him, but he's like, yeah, you fucking did. And she's like, okay, yeah, I did. I loved the development, though, that he will give Eve the correct information, but he is going to also like be unable to resist the impulse to save Villanelle and also like sort of take her for himself. This was so sweet. So then we get the scene because he tries to tell Villanelle to run because MI6 is coming. And she's like, no, they're not. Shut the fuck up. No, they're not. And then sure enough, you hear them like coming through the front door and she realizes that he was dead right. But she wants to like, she is trying to like draw attention a little bit because she's just that kind of fucking person where she can't resist. And he puts a hand over her mouth and stops her. But nevertheless, Eve senses where she is in the room or in the hall and goes up to the door. But by the time she gets them to break down the door, Vilna has gone. And she has apparently accepted the offer to go freelance with Constantine, who says that he will basically be her partner and find her jobs. She doesn't feel that the money will be good enough, but he assures her that they will be able to work something out. I love that he's like, or you could get strangled by Raymond. Can you imagine dying on this carpet? Which is the perfect thing to say to her. Like, if anybody could not handle the indignity of that, it's both a death at the hands of somebody like Raymond and the death in this fucking awful hotel room. It's wonderful. And I should mention too that Constantine tells her Raymond is put in place when it's time for them to take down an operative. He likens Raymond to the person who goes and shoots a horse. And I really thought that seemed clear. It's surprising to me that Villanelle like tries to act like she doesn't believe it. I couldn't tell if she was just acting like she doesn't believe it when really she knows, or if she is so arrogant that she thinks she's that irreplaceable and really believes they would never try to take her out. But you could see from the way that he like strangled her in the car, he has some practice in this, and it is something that he enjoys. And that is pretty much like his reward. He barely like, the implication is that that's how they pay him, is letting him be the one to kill these operatives. That is the fun of it for him. And that's pretty bleak, man. I do not like that at all. So, yeah, we have them all then bust down the door. Villanelle is already gone. And then we have the moment where Eve and Carolyn face off because Carolyn is very angry. She shows it in her weird, restrained way, but she is. And she's basically like, you can never go behind my back again. And my time is very valuable to me, but you seem to take up so much of it. And she says, I have hobbies. Constantine and Villanelle have chosen their side. It's time for you to stick to yours. And honestly, I can't imagine a fairer response. I have not loved Carolyn because she has been so strange and ambiguous. But this response, I mean, I can't find much fault with it. She's being more generous than Eve really deserves. I want this ghost found and Peel wrapped up. You may go. Peel is the guy that got his injection underneath the toenail. I love that she says, too, that anger makes her sleepy, which is such an odd response. Anger makes me, like, nauseous. I get sick, you know. And this is when she tries to apologize to Ken. He says, I thought you were different from Mom and the others. She says, I am. And I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this because it's art. And then stops and stares at him and says, because. And he just goes, because. And she can't answer him. And he nods and walks away. And I was like, ooh, interesting. She started to say, because it's our job. And then she was like, that's not it. And she knew enough that he wouldn't believe it, that she didn't even try and say it, which I find fascinating. And then we get a wonderful wrap up with Villanelle and Constantine in the car talking to one another. And just how the two of them bounce back. They are just such a wonderful pairing. She writes help on the window and he has to like reach over and ugh, God. So yeah, gang's on the road. I guess we will see where they go. Thank you guys again so much for listening. Thank you to Melanie for commissioning this episode. This show has been so much fun. I am very, very eager to continue on this one. So, yeah, so I hope you guys are enjoying listening. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.